Thanksgiving. We've all heard of that holiday, but yet not everyone celebrates it or maybe knows what it's all about. To the most people, mainly outside of North America, they all think about eating turkey and other food, but it's more than just that. In this video, I will tell you all about what Thanksgiving is and how it all came to be.
Hi, my name is Vince and I live in the Netherlands. As a fan of the United States ever since when I was a child, I decided as an adult that beside my regular job, I wanted to focus on learning more about America and teach people about it. I regularly post facts about America on my Instagram called United States Fan just to keep people entertained. Since I figured out that the Netherlands also plays a major part in the Thanksgiving history, I decided to make a video about it and visit some very special places in the cities of Amsterdam, Leiden, and Delfshaven in Rotterdam, in the Netherlands, that are related to Thanksgiving, which I will talk about later. So for now, enjoy the video.
Thanksgiving is a national holiday celebrated on various dates in the United States, Canada, Grenada, St. Lucia, and Liberia. Other subnational entities that celebrate it are Leiden in the Netherlands, Norfolk Island, Australia, and territories of the United States. On this holiday, thanks are given traditionally to God for the harvest and for all kinds of other good things. Thanksgiving is traditionally celebrated with the whole family, and some people even travel very far to be with their relatives. Sometimes, people can even take a day off from work on the following Friday, known generally as Black Friday, to be with their relatives for 4 days long. Thanksgiving is celebrated on various dates. Canada, for instance, celebrates it on the second Monday of October, whilst the rest of the aforementioned countries celebrate it in November, mainly on the fourth Thursday of November. Although Thanksgiving has historical roots in religious and cultural traditions, it has long been celebrated as a secular holiday as well. In other words, Thanksgiving is also being celebrated, albeit being unrelated in regards to religion and irreligion, either negatively or positively. The Thanksgiving holiday's history in North America is rooted in English traditions, dating from the Protestant Reformation. It also has aspects of a harvest festival, even though the harvest in New England occurs well before the late November date, on which the modern Thanksgiving history is celebrated. During the English Reformation in the reign of Henry VIII, and in reaction to the large number of Catholic religious holidays, days of Thanksgiving and special Thanksgiving religious services became important in the English tradition. In 1619, the ship of Margaret of Bristol in England sailed for Virginia under Captain John Woodliff, and brought 38 settlers to the new town of Berkeley Hundred. The London Company proprietors instructed the settlers that the day of our ship's arrival shall be yearly and perpetually kept as a day of Thanksgiving. The Margaret landed her passengers at Berkeley Hundred on December 4, 1619. The settlers did indeed celebrate a day of Thanksgiving, establishing the tradition 2 years and 17 days before the Pilgrims arrived aboard the Mayflower at Plymouth in Massachusetts, to establish their Thanksgiving Day in 1621. Despite the story of the Pilgrims being more well known, the shrine of the first Thanksgiving still stands there at Berkeley Hundred, known today as Charles City County in Virginia. Pilgrims and Puritans who emigrated from England in the 1620s and 1630s carried the tradition of days of fasting or days of Thanksgiving with them to New England. The 1621 Plymouth Feast in Massachusetts and Thanksgiving was prompted by a good harvest. The Pilgrims celebrated this with Native Americans, who had helped them get through the previous winter by giving them food at that time of scarcity. These Pilgrims were known as the Pilgrim Fathers. According to Jeremy Banks, director of the Leiden American Pilgrim Museum, the Pilgrims may have been influenced by watching the annual services of Thanksgiving for the relief of the siege of Leiden in 1574, while they were staying in Leiden, more commonly known in the Netherlands as Leiden's Relief. Leiden's fall Thanksgiving celebration in 1617 was the occasion for sectarian disturbance that appears to have accelerated the Pilgrims' plan to emigrate to America. Later in Massachusetts, religious Thanksgiving services were declared by civil leaders such as Governor William Bradford, who planned the colony's Thanksgiving celebration and feast in 1623. The United States Thanksgiving celebration originated as a harvest festival, and the centerpiece of Thanksgiving remains Thanksgiving dinner. Traditionally consisting of foods and dishes indigenous to the Americas, namely turkey, potatoes, usually mashed, stuffing, squash, corn, green beans, cranberries, typically in sauce form, and pumpkin pie. But other Thanksgiving customs include charitable organizations offering Thanksgiving dinner for the poor, attending religious services like the Netherlands, watching parades, and viewing football games. In American culture, Thanksgiving is regarded as the beginning of the fall-winter holiday season, which includes Christmas and the New Year. The first documented Thanksgiving services in territory currently belonging to the United States were conducted by Spaniards and the French in the 16th century. The New England colonists were accustomed to regularly celebrating Thanksgiving's days of prayer, thanking God for blessings, such as military court or the end of a draft. The event that Americans commonly call the first Thanksgiving was celebrated by the Pilgrims after their first harvest of the New World in October 1621. This feast lasted 3 days, and is recounted by attendee Edward Winslow, was attended by 90 Wampanoag, which is a Native American tribe, and 53 pilgrims. First celebrated nationally on and off since 1789, with a proclamation by first USA President George Washington after a request by Congress. Its celebrations was intermittent until President Abraham Lincoln, in 1863, proclaimed a national holiday of thanksgiving and praise to our beneficent Father who dwelleth in the heavens, to be celebrated on the last Thursday in November. It was made a yearly appointed federal holiday by President Ulysses S. Grant on June 28, 1870 in Washington, D.C., and later a paid holiday for all federal workers throughout America. Since 1942, it received a permanent observation date, the fourth Thursday in November, no longer at the discretion of the President. But it's also important to know this. There are a lot of people who are hurt by this holiday and don't celebrate it. There's a lot of awareness being spread every year, and it's still not taught in schools to a lot of people. Some schools do, but the progress is slower. Thanksgiving in Canada, on the other hand, is always celebrated on the second Monday in October, which celebrates the harvest and other blessings of the past year. This Thanksgiving has been officially celebrated as an annual holiday in Canada since November 6, 1879. On January 31, 1957, the Governor-General of Canada, Vincent Massey, issued a proclamation stating, "A day of general thanksgiving to Almighty God for the bountiful harvest with which Canada has been blessed, to be observed on the second Monday of October." Although the original Act of Parliament references God and the holiday is celebrated in churches, the holiday is mostly celebrated in a secular manner. Thanksgiving is a statutory holiday in all provinces of Canada, except for New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. While businesses remain open in these provinces, the holiday is nonetheless recognized and celebrated regardless of its status.
So now that you all hopefully have a more clear image about what Thanksgiving is all about and how it all came to be, I would like you to take the cities I mentioned at the beginning of the video. Our first stop will be Now, I already mentioned the Pilgrims previously, but to make a more clear image of what they were, the Pilgrims were religious Englishmen who fled their homeland because they did not wish to belong to the state church, the Church of England. From the end of the 16th century, English religious refugees had settled in Amsterdam.
Unfortunately, I was not able to enter the church once I got there, because it was rented at the time. But I was lucky enough to make a picture of this church, the English Reformed Church in Amsterdam. At the back of the chancel of this church is the only stained glass window in the church, gifted in 1920 by Mr. Edward Buck of the United States of America, on the occasion of the 300th anniversary of the departure of the Pilgrim Fathers from Leiden to the New World. Many of the pilgrims had previously lived in Amsterdam, and this is marked by the presence of the window in the church. The pilgrims were strict Calvinists, yet they were not allowed to use the official church buildings in the city, and their pastors were not paid by the city.
When a new group of refugees from England settled in Amsterdam in 1608, its leaders decided the following year that they would leave that city and go to live in the city of our next stop. The Pilgrims resided in the city of Leiden from 1609 till 1620. Now, I am here to show you some remarkable spots in the city that has connections with the Pilgrims. On this street called Langerbroek, Somewhere in a close, Pilgrim James Chilton lived with his family. Now, James Chilton was a Leiden separatist on the historic 1620 voyage of the ship Mayflower, and was the oldest person on board. On April 28, 1619, when Chilton was 63, he and one of his daughters were surrounded by 20 boys, probably because of their religion. They teased them and began throwing rocks at them because they thought that Arminians, remonstrants, were gathering in his house. When Chilton confronted the crowd, he was struck in the head by a large cobblestone and was knocked unconscious. Chilton died on December 8, 1620. He was the only Mayflower Compact signer who died while the Mayflower was anchored at Cape Cod. Located in this beautifully preserved house built around 1365 and 1370 is the Leiden American Pilgrim Museum. Now, this museum tells the stories of the founders of New England. Furnishings from Pilgrim times show aspects of daily life, while events involving the Pilgrims themselves are illustrated by a remarkable collection of 16th and 17th century maps and engravings by artists such as Gerard Mercader, Adrian de Ven, Adrian van Ostade, and Jacques de Guyne.
So, as I entered the museum, I first got a glimpse about how a pilgrim house looked like during the times that the pilgrims lived in Leiden. Many objects in this museum are from those times, which I will show you in a few moments and tell something about it. First, I would like to show you some of the shots I took of it myself. Once you enter the museum, most of the lights are lit by candles, just like the old times. The person you see on the portrait here is Edward Winslow. I already mentioned him earlier in this video, and will do so again later. But to give a more clear explanation about who he was, Edward Winslow was a separatist who traveled on the Mayflower in 1620. He was one of several senior leaders on the ship and also later a Plymouth colony. Both Edward Winslow and his brother Gilbert Winslow signed the Mayflower Compact. Here you can see one of the Bibles that the Pilgrims used at the time they stayed in Leiden. Those tiles that you see here are what's left of William Brewster's house that got demolished. I will tell more about William Brewster later in this video. This coin box is one of the things that remains from the Vrouwkerk, which I will talk about later in this video. This coin box was used to collect money for the poor. Here you see a map of Leiden from the 17th century, about the time when the Pilgrims came to the city to live there for 11 years. You may have noticed another entrance of the museum at the front of the exterior picture that you saw earlier. That part is from how a Dutch house looked like during the medieval times, which of course I will upload on my photography Instagram account.
Behind me, you will see the St. Louis Church, which was built in 1477. The tower, called St. James Tower, was built in 1594, and its carillon was built in 1598. Before the Reformation, this church was a stop for pilgrims traveling to San Diego de Compostela in Spain. Late, the building was used as one of Leiden's many textile halls. It was there that serge, a type of thick woven fabric, was inspected and traded. A lot of the American pilgrims found employment in serge production.
Here you see the City Hall, which was temporarily closed by the time I visited Leiden for shooting these videos, so we may not see much of it, but I will show it to you in pictures. The facade of the City Hall dates from 1595. Several pilgrims were married in the City Hall, amongst them William Bradford and Dorothy May. William Bradford was an English Puritan separatist, originally from the West Riding of Yorkshire in northern England. He moved to Leiden in order to escape persecution from King James I of England, and then emigrated to the Plymouth colony on the Mayflower in 1620, from which he was also one of the people who signed the Mayflower Compact. He went to serve as governor of the Plymouth colony intermittently for about 30 years, between 1621 and 1657. His Journal of Plymouth Plantation covered the years from 1620 to 1646 in Plymouth. His wife Dorothy May, however, died on December 7, 1620, by accidentally falling off the Mayflower in Provincetown Harbor, and drowned. William learned about her death later, as he was with others on an expedition ashore when the incident happened. Civil marriage was a Dutch invention, introduced because nearly half the population did not belong to the state church. The Pilgrims introduced it in America, following the Leiden example, because in their first years they had no preacher.
In commemoration, a non-denominational Thanksgiving Day service is held each year on the morning of the American Thanksgiving Day in this church, called the Peterskirk. Now, the pilgrims recorded their births, marriages, and deaths at the Scottish Church in Leiden, noting the hospitality the pilgrims received in Leiden on their way to the New World. Rumors say that Thanksgiving is based on the October 1st celebration in the Netherlands, known in Dutch as Lijnsonset. Thanksgiving is observed by Orthodox Protestant churches in the Netherlands on the first Wednesday in November, known as Dankdag. It is not a public holiday. Those who observe the day either go to church in the evening or take the day off and go to church in the morning, and occasionally afternoon too.
So when I went inside the church, I immediately went to look for information involving the pilgrims, which I only took pictures from, as it echoed very well in the church if you speak in there. The first thing that caught my attention in that corner was the memorial plaque about John Robinson, who stayed behind in Leiden when most of the pilgrims already left for America. The rest of the pictures that I took will be placed in the video for 5 seconds each, so if you really are interested to read or see about it, you can always pause the video. This is the last picture that I took in Peterskirk, before we went to our next stop.
Across the street from Peterskirk, the grand entrance to the Jean Pacine's almshouse has stood since 1683 in the place where John Robinson's house was. John Robinson was the pastor of the Pilgrim Fathers before they left on the Mayflower. He became one of the early leaders of the English separatists or Brownists, and is regarded, along with Robert Brown and Henry Barrow, as one of the founders of the Congregational Church. On January 27, 1611, John Robinson, William Jepson, Henry Wood and Jane White, bought the so-called Green Gate, about 20 English families lived here in very small houses. After this, the place was often referred to as the English Gate. In 1683, the current Jean-Pacinhof was founded on this spot, which is still inhabited. Since the Pilgrims did not have their own church, they held their services here. A memorial stone is in the wall to the right of the entry. Of the 30-plus courtyard gardens in Leiden, this is the most visited. The poorer members of John Robinson's congregation lived in 12 small houses arranged rather like the 12 dwellings of the almshouse. Among them were Thomas Blossom and his wife, ancestors of American presidents George Bush Sr. and Jr. and Barack Obama.
Here you can see how it looks like behind the main gate.
Because the Pilgrims did not have their own church, they therefore used the Vrouwkerk and other Leiden churches in addition to the Peterskirk for their baptisms, marriages, and funerals. This chapel of the former St. Catherine's Hospital, note, the St. Catherine's Wheel, became a Walloon church in 1638. The Pilgrims had a lot of contact with the Walloon community. A Huguenot called Philip de Lannoy, who was born in Leiden in 1602, was baptized in 1603 in this church. That same year, de Lannoy's aunt, Hester Mayu, married a Pilgrim leader called Francis Cook at the same church. In 1621, de Lannoy set out for Plymouth aboard the Pilgrim's second ship, the Fortune. Francis Cook departed for the Plymouth colony aboard the Mayflower in 1621 with his wife following later. These events proved to be of great importance of the United States because from Philip de Lannoy, later anglicized to Delano, and from Hester Mayu and Francis Cook, many well-known American descent, including Presidents Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Ulysses S. Grant, George H.W. Bush and his son George W. Bush, director Orson Welles, television host Johnny Carson, actor and musician Chris Christopherson, actor Richard Gere, and Beach Boys members Brian, Carl, and Dennis Wilson. When the hospital was still standing, Miles Standish, an English soldier who later joined the Pilgrims, was nursed here. Miles Standish lived with his wife Rose in Leiden and used the title of captain. On July 22, 1620, Miles and his wife Rose boarded the Speedwell, which took them to England, where they boarded the Mayflower that took them to the New World.
On the Great Plate, you can read this information, which I will also put there for 5 seconds each. At the back of the church ruins, you can find this plate, with information about the church, as well as a drawing of how it looked like.
When the Pilgrims lived in Leiden, this alley was called the Stinksteeg, more known as the Stink Alley. William Brewster, an English official and Mayflower passenger, lived in this alley, which is close to the Peterskirk, and had his printing business here. Brewster's house has nearly disappeared through later enlargement, but the blank end wall can still be identified by the contrast of its bricks with those added later. His house was the last on the right.
Here you can see how the alley looks today.
Brewster set the type here for several of the books he clandestinely published in Leiden. Co-separatist Edward Winslow, who had been trained as a printer in London, helped Brewster and no doubt lived in this house before his marriage. Also in this house, Brewster taught English to the university students. Next to the Brewstersteeg is the building, number 15, where William Brewster's printing press was located. In the wall above the entrance of the William Brewstersteeg, in the Peterskirk Koorsteeg, a plaque commemorates this printing company. The plaque is a memorial to the Pilgrim Press, where dissident books were printed against England's King James. At the risk of severe punishment, these books were smuggled to England. The Pilgrim Press even once caused a diplomatic quarrel between England and Holland. Today, a crash is located in the building. The Pilgrims departed from this spot in 1620. They sailed the fleet to Delfshaven with the barge, where the Speedwell was waiting to bring them to England to set sail to the New World together with the Mayflower. This monument, by artist Gert van der Woud, was placed in 2003. It symbolizes the uncertain steps taken by the Pilgrims in traveling to the New World. The names at the base are of Leiden pilgrims who undertook this journey between 1620 and 1647.
This is the plate at the back of the statue, which contains all the names as mentioned. During the editing of this picture, I did my best to make it as much legible as possible.
To close our journey throughout the pilgrim stay in the Netherlands, we will travel to our last stop. This borough in Rotterdam used to be a part of Delft, but in 1795 it became a separate municipality until it was annexed by Rotterdam in 1886. Here, I will show you the Pilgrim Fathers Church. This church goes back as far as 1417, when the Roman Catholic Church of St. Anthony was consecrated on this site. From this point, the pilgrims started their journey on the Speedwell to Southampton, Hampshire, in England, on August 1, 1620.
Once the Speedwell arrived in Southampton, both that ship and another one called the Mayflower set sail for America on August 15, 1620. However, the Speedwell leaked so badly that both ships turned back to England, putting in first at Dartmouth and then at Plymouth. Finally, about a month later on September 16, 1620, the Mayflower set sail, alone, for America. The Mayflower first sighted land on November 9, 1620, which was Cape Cod, in Massachusetts. Because it proved more difficult to anchor the ship, they instead anchored it in Provincetown Harbor on November 11. The original Mayflower has most likely been taken apart by Rotherhithe shipbreaker in England around 1624. However, a replica of the Mayflower called Mayflower II was built in Devon in England during 1955 and 1956 in a collaboration between Englishman Warwick Charlton and Plymouth Plantation. The replica set sail to America on April 20, 1957, recreating the original voyage across the Atlantic Ocean. It arrived on June 22 that same year in Plymouth, Massachusetts, where it is permanently docked since 2020 and acts as a museum ship, just in time for the 400th anniversary of the Pilgrim's arrival. The town also has a living history museum called Plymouth Plantation, which is a recreation of the Plymouth settlement in 1627, as well as a replica of a 17th century Wampanoag homesite, and the Plymouth Rock Monument, a rock with 1620 inscribed on it, the year the Pilgrims landed in the Mayflower. Really worth a visit. This plate in Delfshaven near the Pilgrim Fathers Church basically sums up the whole story I just told. Lol. In the Australian external territory of Norfolk Island, Thanksgiving is celebrated on the last Wednesday of November, similar to the pre-World War II American observance on the last Thursday of the month. This means the Norfolk Island observance is the day before, or 6 days after the United States observance. The holiday was brought to the island by visiting American whaling ships. In Brazil, National Thanksgiving Day was instituted by President Gaspar Dutra through Law 781 of August 17, 1949, at the suggestion of Ambassador Joaquim Nabuco, who was enthusiastic about the commemorations he saw in 1909 in St. Patrick's Cathedral as an ambassador in Washington. In 1866, Law 5110 established that the Thanksgiving celebration would take place on the fourth Thursday of November. This date is celebrated by many families of American origin, by some Protestant Christian denominations, such as the Evangelical Lutheran Church of Brazil, which is of American origin, the Presbyterian Church, the Baptist Church, the Methodist Church, and the Church of the Nazarene, and Methodist denominational universities. The day is also celebrated by evangelical churches, such as the Foursquare Gospel Church in Brazil. In the West Indian island of Grenada in the Caribbean, there is a national holiday known as Thanksgiving Day, which is celebrated on October 25. Even though it bears the same name, and is celebrated at roughly the same time as the American and Canadian versions of Thanksgiving, this holiday is unrelated to either of those celebrations. Instead, the holiday marks the anniversary of the U.S.-led invasion of the island in 1983, in response to the deposition and execution of the socialist Grenadian Prime Minister Maurice Bishop by a military government from within its own party. In the West African country of Liberia, Thanksgiving is celebrated on the first Thursday of November. The Thanksgiving tradition there is rooted in the nation's founding as a colony of the American Colonization Society in 1821 by free people of color from the United States. Although recognized throughout the country, Thanksgiving is practiced chiefly by Americo-Liberians, descendants of Liberia's original African-American settlers. The Philippines, while it was an American colony in the first half of the 20th century, celebrated Thanksgiving as a special public holiday on the same day as the Americans. During the Japanese occupation during World War II, both the Americans and Filipinos celebrated Thanksgiving in secret. After the Japanese withdrawal in 1945, the tradition continued until 1969. It was revived by President Ferdinand Marcos, but the date was changed to be on every September 21, when martial law was imposed on the country. After Marcos's ouster in 1986, the tradition was no longer continued, due to the controversial events that occurred during his long administration. As of 2020, Thanksgiving has been revived as a commercial and cultural holiday, albeit stripped of its official status. SM supermalls led the way in the slow revival of Thanksgiving Day on the same day as in the US, as in the old days. Many malls and hotels offer special sales on this day, which is part of the long celebration of Christmas in the Philippines, which begins in September, unlike Black Friday in the United States. Called Umuganura Day, this is a Thanksgiving festival to mark the start of the harvest in Rwanda. It is celebrated on the first Friday of August. The nation of St. Lucia celebrates Thanksgiving on the first Monday in October, a week before Canada celebrates it. The Harvest Thanksgiving Festival, Erntedankfest, is a popular German Christian festival on the first Sunday of October. The festival has a significant religious component and many churches are decorated with fall crops. In some places, there are religious processions or parades. Many Bavarian beer festivals like the Munich Oktoberfest take place within the vicinity of Erntedankfest. Labor Thanksgiving Day, also known as Kinro Kansha no Hi, is a national holiday in Japan. It takes place annually on November 23. The law establishing the holiday, which was adopted during the American occupation after World War II, cites it as an occasion for commemorating labor and production and giving each other thanks. It has roots in the ancient Shinto harvest ceremony, known as Ninamasai. The Harvest Festival of Thanksgiving does not have an official date in the United Kingdom. However, it is traditionally held on or near the Sunday of the harvest moon, that occurs closest to the autumnal equinox. Harvest Thanksgiving in Britain also has pre-Christian roots, when the Saxons would offer the first sheaf of barley, oats, or wheat to fertility gods. When the harvest was finally collected, communities would come together for a harvest supper. When Christianity arrived in Britain, many traditions remained, and today, the Harvest Festival is marked by churches and schools in late September, early October, same as Canada, with singing, praying, and decorating with baskets of food and fruit to celebrate a successful harvest and to give thanks. Collections of food are usually held which are then given to local charities which help the homeless and those in need.
So this was my video explaining what Thanksgiving is and the history behind it. Before I close this video, there are some interesting things I still want to share with you all. Every year, 280 million turkeys are sold for Thanksgiving. And every year, shortly before Thanksgiving, a ceremony is being held at the White House called National Thanksgiving Turkey Presentation, or Turkey Pardon. During that celebration, the President of the United States is presented with a live domestic turkey by the National Turkey Federation, known as NTF, usually males of the broad-breasted white variety. The ceremony dates back from the 1940s. These turkeys were usually slaughtered and eaten, with some exceptions, prior to the 1970s, when it became standard practice to spare the turkey. During the presidency of George H.W. Bush, it became a tradition, since carried on by all of Bush's successors, for the president to issue a ceremonial pardon to the turkey. Thanks again everyone for watching this video. Give it a like and tell others about it. Special thanks for the people in line, the one I spoke with, and the people who helped me making this video. I have my wooden turkey here for my turkey pardon, and I still need to make my Thanksgiving dinner. So, I would love to wish you all a happy Thanksgiving, as well as happy holidays. Since I figured out that the Netherlands also plays a major part in the Thanksgiving history, I decided to make a video. As a fan of the United States, I regularly post facts about America on my Instagram called the United States Fan, just to keep you. I regularly post facts about. Since I figured out that the Netherlands also plays a major part, so now that you all hopefully have a more clear image about what that. So now that you all hopefully have a more clear image about what Thanksgiving is all about and how it all came to be, I would like it to take you. So now that you all hopefully have a more clear image about what that Thanksgiving. When a new group of I already mentioned the Pilgrims previously, but to make a more clear image of what they were, the Pilgrims were religious Englishmen who fled their homeland because they did not wish to. From the end of the 16th century, when a new group of refugees from England settled in Amsterdam in 1608, its leaders decided the following. When a new group of refugees from England settled in Amsterdam in 1608, its leaders decided the following year that they would have that. On a street called Langebroek, somewhere in a close, Pilgrim James. Now, James Chilton was a Leiden separatist on the historic 1620 lot. They teased them and began throwing rocks at them because they thought that Arminians, remonstrants, were right. They teased them and began throwing. Chilton died on December 8, 1620. Chilton died on December 8, located in his beautifully preserved house built around 16. Now, this museum tells the story. Used other Leiden churches in addition to the Pieterskirk for their. Just making some videos. In 1621, Illinois set out for Plymouth aboard Pilgrim's. In commemoration, a non-denominational Thanksgiving Day services. Held each year on the morning of American. In 1683, the current Jean Passanel. He became one of the early leaders of the English separatists or Brownists, and is regarded along. John Robinson was the pastor of the Pilgrim Fathers before they left on a Mayflower. Is regarded, along with Robert Brown and Henry Barrow, as one of the founders of. Across the street from the Pieterskirk, the grand entrance to the Jean Passanel's almshouse. Pilgrims departed from this spot